So now it's time to start with the JavaScript part of the project. So for that, we need to use the script.js file. Now instead of that, first we need to get the reference to this particular chat, and then also we need to get the reference of this job btn. So for that, here we need to create some const variables. So const, and here I will be using the variable name chat that is going to hold the reference of the particular chat. So I have specified the id as underscore chat. So if I actually show you inside the index.html, so you can see here, this is our chat division tag, and I have specified the id name in this particular way, underscore chat. So I have copied the id, and now coming back to script.js, and here I will be pasting the id name. Then I need to create the another variable. So const, and at this point of time, this is going to be like job btn. So on click of this particular button, we want to fetch the job, alright, from the URL, which is the API. So here I will be using the job btn. Alright, if I control save it, nothing is going to happen because now we have the reference of this particular entire chat section and also this particular button. Also, I'm going to show you the API, means the URL where we are getting the data. So I am now pasting this particular random dad job. So this is the URL, or I can say that the website in which we are going to use this particular API for fetching the data. So if you come back to API, here if we click it, then you can see we have different kinds of way to fetch the data. So here we can see we have this fetch a random dad job. So we are actually going to create a header, and according to the values of header, we will be fetching the data. So we need to actually take care of the application slash JSON because we want to get a JSON response. So we will be using this particular second option to actually get the data in a form of JSON response. The code is pretty simple. I will be explaining you. Even you can simply read this entire custom API documentation. Is totally up to you because we are going to fetch a dad job from this particular API, and I have just simply changed the name little bit to a robot job generator application. Okay, so coming back to the our version of the application, once we did that, it's time to actually add the listener to this particular button. So here this is our job btn. So job btn, and then we need to simply add a listener. So we want to listen to the click listener of the button, and then inside of this particular listener we need to actually call a function. So here I will be name the function as generate joke. Alright, now we need to create this particular function. Also, when we actually load the web page for the first time, instead of clicking on this button, means whenever we click on the button we want to display a joke, but before on the first run we want to display the joke without clicking on the button. So for that we need to call the generate. Actually I have made here a typo name, so now it's actually perfect. So generate, so we need to call this generate joke function before the click of the button code. All right, now it's time to actually create this particular function, then generate joke, and then going to start its block of the code. So now this is actually a network call because we are actually getting the data from our API. So we need to actually create this function as an asynchronous function. So here I need to place the async keyword in front of the function. Alright, and now once we click on the button, then we didn't click again because for the small amount of time we want to disable the button. So here what we can do here, I can simply write job btn dot and disabled, and this is going to be equals to true. Alright, so we just need to simply disable the button once we click it first time. Then you can see we can't click it again for the small amount of time once this particular function execution is done. Okay, so now it's time to actually create the headers for the API. So here I'm actually going to do what I'm going to create the const, then res, which is short for the response. Then here I will be using the await because we want to await until this fetch function fetches the data from the URL API. So here we need to provide the website URL, and then here we need to provide the header. So header, and first I need to actually provide the website. So I have already copied into my clipboard, and then here I need to provide the headers. So here I will be using the headers keyword, which is a property, and then I need to here provide this colon, then starting its curly brackets. Alright, and then here we want to accept the data. accept colon, and then we want a data in the form of application slash JSON, that is this particular one, because we want a JSON response. So this is the header we have created. All right, and then we need to specify a comma, and also here I need to specify a comma. All right, control save it, and now we are actually able to fetch the data. If I simply console this data inside the log, so first I need to check a condition. If response, that is this, if it is okay, then we want to execute the code. So here what I can do, I can simply console log the data. So first I need to initialize the data variable, which is the actual data from the response. So again I will be here using the await keyword, await response dot JSON, because we want a data in a form of JSON. All right, and after that I'm going to simply click on console dot log, and inside of this particular log I will be specifying the data. If I control save it, and now if I decrease the size of the Visual Studio Code window, all right, and control save it, now it's time to click on the button to see whether the data is actually displayed inside the console or not. All right, so here I will be also opening the console log by pressing the F12 key and going to console. If I click on the button, then you can see we get an object. Inside of that we have this particular random job generated with that particular ID, and the status code is 200. So we are successfully able to fetch the data inside the console. All right, so now it's time to actually display this data in a form of message chat. All right, so we need to create couple of more functions. So I'm going to decrease the size of the window so that you can see the code more clearly inside the Visual Studio Code. So after the response, I need to create 2 or 3 more functions. So the first function is actually going to be the create function, that is, or I can just simply type it here, create message element, and then to start its block of the code. All right, so this will be the function which is going to create the message elements. And again I need 2 more functions. So the first one is actually going to be like set element. So this will be used to set the element content. All right, and this particular is going to accept 2 parameters. So the first one is actually going to be element, and the second one is going to be content. And here this particular function is going to accept a content. All right, then I need another function, like function to actually append the message. This is actually going to be, and this one is also going to accept a parameter element. All right, so these are the 3 functions that are required for completion of this entire project, because now we are successfully able to fetch the data inside the console. Now it's time to actually display that particular data in this particular format. All right, so here coming back to the async function. So before the code of this asynchronous call, after this job button disabled is equal to true, we need to here create 2 more variables. So the first one is const, and this is going to be equal to message. So this is a message variable. It is going to be equal to create message element, and then here I need to pass the element. All right, so this is a function that is actually accepting a one element, which is a element that we want to display. So create element function, here the element that we want to display is this particular one. Hey robot, tell me a joke, or you can simply type it here, hey dad, tell me a joke. Totally up to you. So I need to pass this particular one, and after that we need to call the append message function, and here we need to pass the message, that is this one. So this append message function is basically used to actually append the data inside this chat section. So these two, which is the like message, which is actually we are going to tell the robot, that is the message, and this is the joke. So these 2 things are actually appended by using this append message function once we write the code inside it here. All right, so after the message we need to also create the things for the joke. So here I need to create a one more variable. So const, then joke, then this is going to be equal to create message element, but we need to call it directly without specifying anything here. And then we need to here call the set element content function. Instead of this set element content function, I need to here pass the joke variable, because the element in which we want to display the data, right? and then the content that we want to display before actually adding anything. Because here I will be writing the code. If I show you, if I actually refresh it, this particular shape, which is actually defining that something is going on, means something is actually fetching on from the API or a server. So in order to get that particular shape, here I need to write a couple of lines of the code, which I'm just simply going to copy and paste it because it is little time consuming. So inside this single quote, I'm going to paste this particular code, which will basically use to actually get this shape. Alright, and after that, this particular shape, not the entire, this particular one, which you can see a moment. Alright, and after that, we need to call the append message function because we want to append that particular message inside the chat section. Alright, so here I need to pass the joke. Alright, so once we construct the joke, we also set the element content, and then we also pass in the data so that it can be append to the chat section so that we can actually see it inside the chat. Alright, and inside this particular response, after the response dot OK, once we are getting the response, here we need to also add the data, which means the job data, because this particular one is already fetched here. But here you can see inside the create message element, once we are actually getting the job data, I didn't specify anything here. So we need to also pass this job data to this particular create message element function once we are getting the data. So we are actually getting the data from this server because the response is okay. So here we need to pass the job to that particular set element content data, because this is actually going to display empty thing once we are actually loading the application for the first time. So if it is here, you can see the application is loaded for the first time, then this particular code will does the job for us, like this one, these two lines of the code. And then once we are getting the data after this response is okay, then we need to actually append this particular message to this thing, which is this particular chat. All right, so we need to do this thing here. So here we need to call the set element content function again, and then we need to pass here joke, and then here we need to use the joke, or I can simply here use the data dot joke, because we need to get the joke from the data. Alright, if I actually show you the console.log object, so we have the joke because we want to fetch the joke, and it is actually stored inside the data. So that is the reason we have did here a data dot joke. Alright, so this is all for the setting the joke data. Now it's time to add the message element so that our application will be look like this. Alright, so coming back to the create message element function. So here first I need to create the element. So const element, then this is going to be equals to, and then document. So first we need to create the element, create element. So we want to create the division element. So that is the reason this particular function is called as create message element, because it is going to create the element for both message and the joke. Then here I will need to specify the div tag. And after that I need to here use element dot class list and then dot add property. And here I need to pass the CSS class name, which is actually message. Alright. And after that we need to check for the content if the content is actually true. So content, so if it is true, so then we want to do what? We want to simply use the element dot class list dot add. So we want to display the response. So this particular class is actually coming from the style.css. If I show you, so this is the response, because we are actually telling the message. So this is actually our response that we are actually telling the robot. Alright, so come back to script.js, and after that once we add the CSS response, then we need to call the set element, because we are updating the CSS, but we also need to update its CSS through set element content function. So first here I need to pass the element and then the content. Okay, and in the else part we need to set the data for the joke, not element, it is actually else part. Inside of that I need to use the element dot class list dot add, and here I need to pass the class name, which is actually joke, that is this particular class, which is actually going to display the data in this particular format by using this particular CSS code. So we are actually using the CSS dynamically by using the JavaScript here. Alright, so this is what we have to do in the else part, and then we want to return the element. return, and here I need to use the element. Alright, now inside this set element content, we just need to update the element inner HTML. So here I need to use the element dot inner HTML, then this is going to be equal to content. Alright, and now you can see if I control save it, nothing is going to be visible because we need to actually start the coding of this append message function, because this is the function that is going to actually enable the thing to actually see it inside the chat section. Or I can say that if in order to see anything inside the chat section, this particular function will be responsible. So here we need to actually do what? We need to use the chat, that is, if I can show you here, this is the chat variable that has the reference to the chat section. So we need to update the chat. So chat dot, so we want to append a child here, so we are going to append the child, that is the HTML element, which is the element that we have passed to this particular function once we are calling it. So we are actually calling this append child function here. If you can see here, we are actually calling the append child function, not append child, we are actually calling the append message function here once we are setting the message and once we are setting the joke. Alright, so append child and then we set the element. If I control save it, then you can see we are now successfully able to fetch the data, or I can say that display the data inside this particular chat section. Chat elements, if I again click on the button, then you can see we are not able to see the data again. So if I refresh it and again if I click on the button, then we are not able to get the another response, or I can say that the joke. So the problem for that, I think the button is actually disabled because we have set the button disabled is equal to true, and we didn't actually set it to false, because after getting the response, if I actually see the code, so here you can see we are actually setting the data, but here we need to also do one more thing. We need to actually set the button, which is the joke btn, that is this one, joke btn disabled, that is this is equal to false. If I control save it, and now if I again click on the button, so now we are successfully able to get the data whenever we click on the button. Alright, so application is working perfectly fine. So that's it for this particular module. I hope you like this module. If you like this module, then leave your review, because your review motivates me to create more awesome content like this. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you very much.